Hey, what's going on? It's Joshua. I hope you're doing well. So in today's video, I want to discuss with you ETFs and what exactly they are. Except instead of explaining it to you like you were like a college student or something, I'm gonna explain it to you as if you were a 5-year-old. So let's get started. I think oftentimes, the finance industry overcomplicates things on purpose, and an ETF is not much different. My goal with this video, and really just with my channel in general, is to sort of bring that barrier of entry down to a level where everybody can understand finance and everybody could be financially successful, right? These are things that are not taught in school, but that's what I'm here for. So let's get started. ETFs. What the heck is that? Okay, so an ETF is basically short for exchange traded fund. And on a very basic level, an ETF is just a basket that holds a bunch of different investments. An easy way to think of an ETF is like a box of crayons, right? You've got your box, and the box itself is the ETF. Within that box of crayons, you've got the actual individual crayons. Those individual crayons are technically the individual stocks within the ETF. And so in this example, the red crayon might be a share of Disney stock, the blue crayon a share of Apple, and the yellow crayon perhaps a share of Tesla stock, and so on. You get the point. And so an ETF really is the same way, where the ETF itself is just the container. It acts as the box that holds all of the individual stocks. Now, without getting into too much detail, because that's not really the point of this video, it's important to mention that ETFs don't just hold stocks. They can hold a bunch of other investments as well, such as bonds, currencies, and even commodities. Now, I want you to picture in your mind just for a second that you had to color a picture. So your teacher hands you a box of crayons, but when you go to open that box of crayons, the box is empty. Now, that box of crayons is now worthless. It has no value. It's just an empty box because its value is tied to the crayons inside of the box. And an ETF is no different. You see, because an ETF is just a container. It's a basket that holds individual stocks. And those individual stocks that make up the ETF are what give the ETF value. So is that sort of making sense? If it is, and if you're getting some value from this video, go ahead and give me a like on the video. I would appreciate that so much. Okay, so now that you sort of understand what an ETF is, I want to actually break down the words exchange traded fund. So let's start with the word exchange. Now, technically, the word exchange traded is just one word, but we're going to break them down as if they were two separate words. So exchange is actually referring to the stock exchange, at least in this context. And the stock exchange is just a fancy word for the stock market, right? And so when you see that word exchange, understand that it's just referring to the stock market. Okay, so how about the word traded? That's an easy one because it literally means what it says. It means that it can be traded. It referring to the ETF, right? It can be traded on the exchange. Exchange traded. It can be traded on the stock market. Does that make sense? And the last word, fund. What does that mean? So a fund is basically just a pool of money that investors put together to invest in something specific. You may have heard of the word mutual fund or index fund or hedge fund. There's all types of different funds and all of them have a specific purpose. They all invest in something specific. So now when you hear the word exchange traded fund or ETF, just know that it means a fund that's traded on the stock market. Another easy way to think about an ETF is as a mutual fund that trades on the stock market, because traditionally mutual funds, index funds don't actually trade on the stock market. Like you can't go to your brokerage account and actually buy shares of a mutual fund. But with an ETF, you can do that. You can buy and sell it similar to a stock. And so when you think about an ETF, just think of it as a mutual fund that can be traded on the stock market like stocks. So now I wanna add a few things to this video that I think are somewhat important, but I don't wanna try and cram too much into the video, so I'll keep it as short as possible. Now, in this video, we talked a lot about ETFs that hold stocks. I need you to understand that ETFs can hold really just about any investment. There's ETFs that hold, like I mentioned earlier, currencies or bonds or commodities. Say for example, you wanted to invest in gold without actually going out and buying like physical gold bars. You can invest in the GLD ETF, which is an ETF where the underlying asset of the ETF is gold. And so when you purchase a share, when you invest in a share of that GLD ETF, of the gold ETF, you're actually giving your portfolio immediate exposure to gold without actually having to go buy physical gold bars. Okay, so it's really important to mention at this point that when you purchase a share of an ETF, any ETF, it could be an ETF where the underlying asset are stocks, the underlying asset could be gold or another type of commodity, anything. When you purchase a share of an ETF, you don't actually own the underlying assets of that ETF. So for example, let's go back to the gold ETF, right? The GLD ETF. So if you were to purchase a share of that ETF, you don't actually technically own physical gold. You simply own a share of the fund itself. The fund technically does own the underlying asset, right? But you don't. You just own a share of the fund. I just thought that's important to mention because I think some people might have the idea that when you buy, for example, an S&P 500 ETF, that you technically own all 500 stocks that make up the ETF. And that's not necessarily true. You don't actually own all 500 stocks. You just own a share of the fund, and the fund owns the 500 stocks. That was a lot of information. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the video off right there. If you have not already liked the video, please do so. If you actually learned something, give it a thumbs up. Also remember to subscribe to my channel. I post content like this up to 3 times a week, so you don't wanna miss out on it. Remember to hit the bell notification so that you can be notified whenever I do post. And if you're still watching after all of that, I just wanna tell you that you're awesome, and I will see you again soon. Take care.